In this video, we'll turn our attention to the supply side of the equation for crude oil. There are four factors that we need to be aware of, namely OPEC, geography, weather, and geopolitics. The first one we'll discuss is OPEC, which has a massive impact on oil prices, production, and policies. OPEC is short for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. It consists of 13 countries, of which the largest is Saudi Arabia, and is a consortium that aims to keep oil prices balanced by influencing the supply side or production side of oil. The cartel was formed in 1960 and its members account for over 30% of the world's crude oil production, which is about 28 million barrels per day. Now, apart from OPEC, there's also OPEC Plus, which is an additional 10 member countries, making up a total of 23 oil producers, with the aim of influencing a bigger part or share of the oil market. The OPEC Plus members combined account for close to 40% of the world's oil production. So even though the world's biggest oil producer is still the United States, and even though it's not part of OPEC or OPEC Plus, the second and third largest, which is Saudi and Russia, are part of the cartel. So how do OPEC and OPEC Plus affect the oil market? Well, through the supply side of the equation. As they control 40% of the world's oil production, their joint production policies can have far-reaching implications for oil markets and by extension the global economy. If the cartel deems that the demand outlook is really positive for the oil market and there are risks to massive undersupply, in other words, too few barrels are produced, the cartel can aim to boost production among its members to try and rebalance the supply and demand imbalances and try to stabilize prices. Similarly, if the cartel deems that the demand outlook is very dire and that there are risks to massive oversupply, in other words, too much oil is being produced, the cartel can aim to curb production among its members to try and rebalance the supply and demand imbalance to try and stabilize prices. This is exactly what happened back in May 2020, after we had the biggest drop in oil prices in history. There were multiple reasons for this big drop. The drop was firstly driven by a massive drop in global oil demand as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the global lockdowns the world was going through. But at the same time, there was also infighting among OPEC Plus between Saudi Arabia and Russia, which sparked a price war and added fuel to the downside. The cartel was soon forced to settle their differences and step up to the plate as oil prices traded in negative territory. OPEC Plus decided on a new production cut plan to try and offset the drastic drop in global oil demand. Now, even though there were other factors in play, the biggest driver for oil upside from June 2020 was a result of OPEC Plus agreeing on a massive 10 million barrels per day production cut in May 2020. The cartel only started to incrementally bring back supply from June 2021. The impact that OPEC and OPEC Plus decisions has on the oil market is material and means that their monthly meetings is often a source of volatility for energy markets. The one thing to be mindful of is that OPEC sources loves to play with the markets, oftentimes releasing incorrect rumors just to deny the rumors and say something completely different. So even though OPEC decisions can be very market moving, especially when they deviate from what was expected, it can be really tricky events to trade and is often best positioned for after the dust has settled. The second driver we'll discuss is geography. Geography can have a huge impact on oil prices, especially in the Middle East, and especially in a very small but incredibly important choke point called the Strait of Hormuz. This strait, if we take a look at the map, is located between Oman and Iran and connects the Persian Gulf with the Arabian Sea. So why is this important? Well, according to the EIA, which is the US Energy Information Administration, about 21% of the world's oil moves through this narrow 21-mile corridor. Now, this is particularly important because of a particular country that borders on the Strait of Hormuz, which of course is Iran. Since there is always an uneasy relationship between Iran and the US and Saudi Arabia, this area is a hotspot that can create bottlenecks where there are geopolitical tensions. When tensions escalate between these three, we usually get threats from the likes of Iran that they will look to block the Strait of Hormuz, which of course can have big impact on supply and can affect short-term oil prices. So if reports come out that Iran has sunk a ship or captured a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, or that there has been military confrontations in the strait, that can see some immediate upside in oil prices in the short term. So keeping an eye on developments from a geopolitical landscape in the strait is an important driver for crude prices. Now, sticking with more maps, but moving to the third driver, it is of course weather. Weather can have a meaningful impact on the supply side of oil, specifically in the Gulf of Mexico. Why is the Gulf of Mexico so important? Well, just looking at the chart, the sheer size of the oil operations in this part of the US is massive. According to the US Energy Information Administration, The Gulf of Mexico federal offshore oil production accounts for 15% of total US oil production, and federal offshore natural gas production in the Gulf accounts for 5% of total US dry consumption. The more important thing to consider though is that over 40% of total US petroleum refining capacity is also located along the Gulf Coast, as well as 51% of total US natural gas processing plant capacity. As the Gulf is so prone to hurricanes and storms, it makes the area very important to watch for oil markets. During the likes of Hurricane Harvey, the storm saw 25% of the Gulf's production shut down and also caused 22% of total refining capacity for the US to grind to a halt. Furthermore, when devastating Hurricane Katrina hit, it saw over 1.3 million barrels of refining capacity shut down, which sent supply concerns jolting higher and of course caused massive upside for crude prices. Now, if you open up a Google browser and type in oil, Gulf of Mexico and weather, you'll find plenty of examples like these that we can see on the screen. The bottom line is that we can't ignore the importance of weather when it comes to oil prices. The fourth driver on the supply side we'll talk about is geopolitics. Is there something that can make oil prices rise 40% in 7 days? Yes, there is. And the answer is geopolitics. Taking a look at this chart, we can see that from the 25th of February, WTI jolted higher by 40% in just 7 trading days. This was due to Russia launching their special military operation against Ukraine. The threat of war drove markets to fear the worst regarding the supply of oil and natural gas out of Russia. The fear of Russia using oil and gas as a weapon, especially against Europe, further exacerbated supply concerns and saw a 40% jump higher, like we said, in just 7 short trading days. This was a very good and recent example of the impact that geopolitics can have on commodity prices when it impacts supply concerns. That means that keeping track of geopolitics as a key driver for oil prices is always important.